for your patience,
Okay,
guys.
we're ready. Then we'll call meeting to order, please, and hope everybody's doing well. Good to see everybody. We'll have a roll call.
All right, notes are set up, but roll call. One more second. Where is my packet for the week? There it is. Okay. Okay, roll call. Here we go. Judith Humberg. Are you on mute? Not here today? Okay. BJ Burns.
Here.
Natalie, I think she sent an email that she'd try to join later.
Right.
Louis Fagoni.
Here.
Thank you. Cynthia Duenas.
Here.
Thank you. John Vars. Don't know if he's in today. Okay. Bill Cook. Okay. Peter Markey.
Here.
Bob Marsh.
Here.
We're excited to have you back. Awesome. Ron Sturgeon.
Here.
Awesome. And I'm Lauren Silverman. I'm here. And I think I see someone raising their hand. That might be, oh, that's you, Peter. Okay, I'll circle back. Natural Resource Conservation Staff, Jim Howard. San Mateo County Agricultural Commissioner, Corin Will.
Hello, good evening.
Hi there. Farm Bureau Executive Director, Jess Brown.
Here.
Thank you. San Mateo County Planning Staff, Laura Richstone.
Here.
And UC Co-op Extension Rep, Frank McPherson. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody from the audience have anything they want to tell the committee, or new things, or anything they're going to want to discuss?
I will. And Cynthia, I do.
Okay.
I had a suggestion after the last meeting whether for some of us, if it's okay to exchange contact information. For some of us who don't know each other, I don't. Just in case we can contact each other in between. I don't know if there's a public list, but I think what Laura said, if we had to all approve it.
Yeah, something, I'm not Laura, but just jumping in to concur, it's something that we thought might be helpful. It's kind of an internal contact list just with the members, so that if something comes up, similar to the email Natalie just sent today, that we can communicate with each other as needed.
So yeah, if every member is fine with that, I will distribute the list. I'll give you until Wednesday to say, please don't distribute my contact information. If I hear nothing from you, I will distribute to the members only, which is the 15 of you all and the non-voting members. And if you wish not to be included in the list, you can email me or call my work phone and I will remove you.
Thank you. Again, does anyone else have any thing they want to bring up to the committee? Okay, then we'll move on to the committee. Do they have any stuff they want, anything they want to discuss or make comments on? Now's the time.
I usually
Ron
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Ron Sturgeon speaking. I didn't understand what just transpired. It's not permitted for us to be exchanging with every member of the committee. It's a violation of the Brown Act. We can, I mean, there can be a limited communication, but distribution of anything to the entire committee it just can't be done. I don't know what
to clarify what just happened, there was a request for committee members to have each other's contact information just in case they had questions or they needed to meet each other for site visits, etc. So there was a request to share phone numbers and emails between committee members as opposed to being in the dark and having the gatekeeper. Exchanging contact information is not against the Brown Act. Meeting and talking about items on agendas is, but the exchanging of contact information falls within the allowable guidelines of the Brown Act.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought there was somebody was trying to distribute something and wanted contact information. But yeah, no, it's okay to exchange contact information.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about from the committee to discuss?
I think Crystalline from Half Moon Bay has her hand up.
Who's that?
Crystalline?
Hi.
Oh.
Hi. So sorry, my internet blipped out and I missed public comment. Would it be okay if I made one?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to let you guys know that the city of Half Moon Bay underwent an economic recovery task force. And the cool thing is they've hired a consultant and it's coast-wide, not just the city. The recovery task force just identified their major areas of focus for economic recovery. And there's now going to be a whole group of, I think, about 6 people who chose environment and agriculture as their area of most passion. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up that that was out there. I have let them all know about this wonderful meeting and the commissioners on this beautiful meeting. And so you might have some people reach out to you over the next couple of months to get your thoughts and feelings and input on how you could best be helped through the city and the county and the state.
Okay, very good. That's interesting. At least there's some, hopefully there's more people interested in agriculture.
Oh, you'd be surprised. It was a popular one.
Good, glad to hear that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up?
I see that Rita also has her hand up with Puente.
Rita?
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. Just 2 things. One is that we are hiring a housing advocate for Puente. It's a new position, and we hope that we can learn more about some of the successful efforts for housing, including labor housing. So once we hire this person, I hope that I can make introductions to some of the farms that have developed housing on properties. But also, we haven't gotten any applications. Well, we got one. So if you know anybody that is good in this field, please refer them to us. And then the second thing is that we're gonna have what we think is the last clinic coordinated by Puente for vaccines on April 23rd. So if there's any other, not only farm workers now, but I'm really focusing still on farm workers, otherwise anybody 18 and up that is gonna need a vaccine, please tell them to contact Puente. We'll issue the flyer until tomorrow evening, and we'll start making appointments on Wednesday. And we're hoping the county is working with us, and the county has been a really great partner for this effort. And hopefully we'll get the Johnson vaccine, so it's only 1 clinic and not 2. But all the information will be out on the flyer tomorrow evening. And again, calls, we're receiving them until Wednesday morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. I appreciate that.
Hey, BJ, I got a question.
Go ahead.
It's for the lady that just spoke about
Rita?
the housing advocate. Could she explain a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. So for a long time, and I know this is not only to the South Coast, but the South Coast community has been loud about the need for housing. Not only that housing is expensive, but also that is pretty much non-existent and it's hard for anybody to find housing. So no one at Puente has had the job to actually focus on housing, learn what has worked, and try to make those connections facilitated among both farmers or other organizations that are looking into housing. And so this is the first time that our organization is gonna have a paid staff member to concentrate his or their time into these efforts. And so we're not coming necessarily, Rob, with an agenda of what we want to do. We've heard about different things that have worked. And I wish we could just copy paste what has worked. But I think the first months of this position are going to be just learning about what's viable and also about all the different, I wouldn't say barriers necessarily, but there's different laws that prevent a lot of development on the area. And we know there's a reason for that, right? That we want to keep our area green. And so we know we need to learn about housing and then figure out what's the best role for Puente. We think that we can be good at advocating for funding. We can be good about bringing funders together. And then about having a paid position whose job is to then facilitate some of these efforts. And I will be reaching out to some of you I know more closely than others. And then obviously we'll be reaching out to other organizations that locally, at least in the Pescadero, Loma Mar area, have been concerned about housing, like the Pescadero Foundation, the La Honda Unified School District. And so I don't expect us to have an agenda right away. I expect us to learn a lot on the first 4 to 6 months, and then the sign up line on what this position can do best to facilitate some, bringing potentially some labor housing, or at least advocating for housing, finding where the resources are, finding, what needs to be in place to increase some of the housing. We will not be focusing on labor housing only, but the 2 examples that we've seen in the community of Pescadero have actually been labor housing. So maybe that's the place to start. But at this point, I don't know a lot about what to share, Rob, except that we want a person appointed to look into this and work with the local organizations on developing what's necessary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rita, for answering that.
I
Anyone
see
else?
now Carrie has her hand up.
Carrie?
Just want to let everyone know that the Half Moon Bay Local Coastal Plan update will be heard by the Coastal Commission this Thursday. BJ, Jess Brown, and myself met with the planners twice and to encourage them on certain of their agricultural policies. The Coastal Commission has processed their LCP amendment in groundbreaking speed, and because the Half Moon Bay staff had worked so closely, they aren't making any changes. So hopefully the majority of the policies they come up with will be supportive of ag. So it just wanted to let everybody know that that is going forward, and then it will, once approved, it will come back to the city of Half Moon Bay for their final implementation. But it is going forward, and appreciated input from BJ and Jess on this also, so that we could, on behalf of Farm Bureau, make comments. But I think it's really to support the agriculture we have within the city limits of Half Moon Bay, and we're hopefully they'll have some more housing within the city limits also. Rita, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that. Okay, anyone else? If not,
So I think last thing was for me is just we've been starting to do time checks just to see kind of how much time we have for each agenda item. And we've got 2 kind of main regular agenda items this time. So do you want me to tell you kind of when we're 20 minutes in or 30 minutes into either of those in discussion? Okay.
okay, go ahead. Thank you.
I'll give like a 20-minute and then a 30-minute heads up.
Okay. All right, then since you're there, you want to make any comments on the Covart updates, anything on Covart 19? Laura?
I don't have anything on my end that that is new necessarily, and Commissioner Corrin may be able to provide more information. I think they're starting to wind down the vax clinics for ag because we've started from my understanding, a lot of the ag workers have been taken care of, but they'll be available, as Rita said, for another couple weeks. Commissioner Corn, if you have any, you probably have more information, detailed information to provide.
Yeah, it's basically winding down. I think this week is the last mobile vaccine clinic that's going to be done, and that's just for a second dose for some of the on the farms. Last week I got an email that 775 farm workers were vaccinated through the mobile vaccine clinics. That was, of course, with a lot of help from Puente too, getting out there and helping that facilitate that. So yeah, it's great work. So happy about all the vaccines that have been happening.
Right, good, very good. Okay, if there's nothing else there, then we'll move on to getting the approval of minutes of February the 8th and March 8th. Could we get approval motion on those, please?
I got a comment on March 8th minutes, if I may speak. This is Peter.
Okay.
Yeah, I made a comment on the March 8th minute that meeting that if you drill near Sangagoro Creek because it's adjudicated, and if it's proven that you're drawing water from the creek to the well, you would need water rights. Nothing was stated in that meeting about my statement. So in the minutes, just stating that.
This is Lauren, just wanting to jump in and clarify. Is this for agenda item 7?
It's the March 8th meeting, and I was it's for item 6 or the item 6 of the minutes. It's not in my statement that I made. Is not in the minutes of March 8th meeting. That's
yes, I just want to confirm which agenda item it was so I can correct that. I believe it was probably
Item
7. Yeah, okay. And let's see.
mine is the 6th. Consideration action of, oh, I get what you're saying. Let me look.
Yeah, I just want to make sure to correct anything. I have here the committee discussed Sangagoro Creek water supply.
It's number 7.
Yeah,
how
number
the proposed. Would you like me to add? We also discussed adjudicated water rights there.
Yeah, adjudicated water rights. What I would like to add is that if it's proven of Sangagoro Creek because it's adjudicated that the water proven from the drawing from the creek to the well, you need water rights.
We don't normally include that level of detail. We'll just provide like the topics discussed because what winds up happening is.
That'll be fine, thank you.
Okay, so I'm adding just so everyone knows when we discuss it. Agenda item 7, committee action, the committee discussed, I'm including in that list now, adjudicated water rights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments on the March 8th meeting? If not, could I get approval, please?
I never want to make a motion on the minutes that I drafted.
No,
so yeah.
They're not. Can we get someone to make a motion here on the March 8th meeting since we're on it?
I move we approve.
Yeah, I move approval of the minutes of March 8th and February 8th.
Okay, we got approval, a motion for both meetings. Can we get a second?
As amended?
What's that?
As amended, the minutes?
Yeah.
I check.
Was that? Sorry, just missed 2 seconded.
I second, if nobody
Bill.
else did.
Hi, Bill.
That's
and Bill, let's add you to the roll call as well. So just stating verbally that Bill is here.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Seconded by Bill. Okay, and let's do a roll call vote.
Mhm.
Judy, excuse me. Oh, she's not here. I need to call in the people that I have marked as here. Okay, Lauren, I'm catching up. BJ,
Yes.
Louis,
Yes.
Cynthia.
Yes, on the March only.
Okay, and then do you want to abstain on the February ones?
Correct. That was absent.
Thank you. Bill,
Yes.
Doki, and Peter,
Yes.
Yes.
Bob.
I abstain.
Thank you. Ron,
Yes.
and I'm Lauren, and I vote yes. Okay, we're passed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. Information from Midpen. Mike, I understand you're here. Is that reason you want to talk first, or?
I'll just read the agenda item into the record real quick. Regular agenda item number 7, an informational item, presentation by the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District, Midpen, on protected coastal open space and agricultural lands within the district.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen if you're ready, Laura. And let me ask, are you seeing the full screen or are you seeing 2 slides on the screen?
I don't think we're seeing anything.
Anything.
Nothing.
Let me make you a co-host and see if that will let you share. 1 second.
Okay,
Then Mike, are you hearing my voice?
I am.
I think you're a co-host now, so try sharing again, and if it doesn't work, I'll put up the PDF that you emailed me.
Is it coming through yet?
No.
All right. I will share my screen with the PDF if that's okay, and then you can just tell me next slide. Does that work?
That will work.
Excellent. 1 moment, please.
This is Peter. I don't have it in my packet. I go from 6 to 8.
It wasn't an attachment. It's just a presentation by them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Mike Williams, Real Property Manager with the Open Space District. I am here with Omar Smith, Senior Property Manager, and Lewis Reed, Resource Specialist. This presentation on protecting open space and agricultural land has periodically been presented to the Farm Bureau in the past. Last year, during the LCP amendment discussions, I believe Carrie Burke asked if the district would do this presentation for the Agriculture Advisory Committee. And at the beginning of this year, Laura Ridgestone followed up with me and requested if we would do that. And so here we are. The first slide you are seeing is looking at our La Honda Creek Preserve, where trails were opened in late 2017 with an existing cattle ranching operation. These trails coexist compatibly with the grazing operation. Slide 2, please. Thank you, Laura. In 2004, San Mateo County Local Agency Formation Committee approved the Midpen's Coastal Service Plan and annexation to include the San Mateo coast. This service plan includes a coastal mission statement that includes the protection of coastal agriculture. It includes active engagement with our coastal partners. It includes a memorandum of understanding with the Farm Bureau, a mutual aid agreement for fire services with San Mateo County, which includes tax compensation fee to lands taken off the tax rolls. A similar agreement with La Honda Pescadero Unified School District that also includes a tax compensation fee. Next slide, please. So why does Midpen have a coastal service plan? Well, in the 1990s, local organizations and community groups recognized a need for increased protection of coastal open space and agriculture from threat of development. The National Park Service, California State Parks, San Mateo County Parks had limited capacity to expand their operations to manage working lands. Land trusts lack the resources to manage open space preserves or public access on a long-term basis. In 1998, voters approved an advisory measure, Measure F, asking coastal residents if they supported Midpen's annexation of the San Mateo coast to their boundaries. And then for about 3 years, from 1999 to 2002, there was a Citizens Advisory Committee that worked with Midpen to develop the service plan, vision, and policies. In 2003, the district's board of directors adopted the service plan and an environmental impact report. And as mentioned, LAFCO certified that service plan and provided for the annexation in 2004. Since the approval of the service plan and annexation, Midpen has protected over 12,000 acres of open space and agricultural land on the coast. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is a map of our coastal annexation area, and the kind of darker green properties were our existing preserves at the time of the annexation. There's a blue line that travels along the western boundary of most of those properties. That was our existing boundary. The boundary was expanded to the San Mateo coast to the west, to the north, to the southern boundary of the city of Pacifica, and then to the south to the Santa Cruz County line. The kind of backslashed yellow properties are coastal lands that were purchased that include grazing on them. And if I go from south to north, there was a Mendigo Ranch, which was an addition to Russian Ridge. The former Driscoll Ranches was an addition to La Honda Creek Open Space Preserve. Last year, we brought you the Gordon Ridge property near San Gregorio. A number of years ago, the Toto Ranch and the Tenitas Creek Ranch and the Tenitas Creek watershed. Along Labidos Ridge, there have been a number of properties as additions to Prisma Open Space Preserve. And then just south of Highway 92 were lands that were added to our Miramontes Ridge Open Space Preserve. Properties that are hard to see, and I wish I'd had a cursor right now, but along Prisma Creek Road, there's a 7-acre farm property. At the top of the screen, there's a 24-acre farm property that's leased to the Cosalinos. And then probably too small to see, but on the northernmost property, 2-acre farm tree farm property that is leased to Santa's Tree Farm to the Serra family. I'll mention two of the properties, the Mendigo Ranch property in the middle lower portion of the screen and the Driscoll Ranch property. are Mindigo in 2016 and at the end of Sears Ranch Road on the Driscoll property in late 2017, we introduced public access to those properties with the existing grazing operations. And Midpen believes in working with ranchers to carefully plan for trails which can coexist with grazing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Omar Smith, and I'll let Omar take over from here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Omar Smith. I'm the Senior Property Management Specialist with Midpen. And I get the enjoyable task of working hand in hand with our grazers and ranchers in some of the row crop properties that we're doing. As Mike pointed out earlier in the slides, there's the kind of aqua colored lighting, and that's our row crop areas. And then the grazing has got the diagonal yellow striping on it. Since I've been in the property management area, one of the key things that we're doing is we're focusing on the development of some of the needed infrastructures. So we have had not only dealing with boundary items, we've been doing fences, and we've recently done fences at the Prisma, Blue Brush, Elkis area. We supported fences and corral work at the new South Cal property. When Gordon Ridge, with the support of Post, Gordon Ridge was re-fenced for the perimeter on that property. We did a coastal highway fence in the last year and a half or so along the Toto Ranch. We're also working on water infrastructure at Toto, and thanks to your approval on it, we're adding a domestic well, and we'll be going out to bid for the initial bid walks a week from today for that property. For Driscoll, we've been doing some fencing infrastructure, some gate works definitely tied into the access to allowing the public intermix with the ranching on that property, along with water infrastructure of additional tanks and water lines. For the Lone Madrone, we are getting ready to do a new fencing infrastructure project with their for an easement access to keep cows out of the creek and watershed on that property, but have also done a spring and water line development on what we call POD 17, which supplies water to the ranch area, and then a P3 spring, which does some of the upper pasture grazing water infrastructure. So we've been doing that. On our Mindigo property, we are getting ready to do with NRCS, we're working on a south pasture expansion. So we're doing a water infrastructure improvement and then a fencing project that will add additional lands to the grazing property in there, which is nice because we had about 8,000 acres of cattle grazing in the coastal areas, and we've worked and have added 2,000 additional acres back into cattle grazing that were traditionally grazed but had stopped. And so we're in the process of reintroducing grazing into those areas, along with our Big Dipper Ranch, which is recently gone under a change, and we're in the process of going out for an RFP towards the end of this year so that we'll get grazing back on the Big Dipper Ranch. Hopefully for November of this upcoming year is when we're looking to try to get a local tenant back onto that property. Can you go to the next slide? So since 2004, Midpen has protected over 12,000 acres, as Mike had said earlier, for range and farmland on the San Mateo coast. These include 8,000 of rangeland under long-term conservation grazing with ranchers. We have, I think, 8 ranching families, and then 33 acres of agricultural farmland. And we are currently in the process on our farmland for Purisima Creek, the small 7-acre property there. We're looking at developing the lease and getting that signed with Frank Ochoa, who's taken over for his father on that property since his untimely passing. But we're working to extend that and continue the tradition of row crop farming for that family on that particular property. Along with that, there's been no loss in grazing or farmlands on lands purchased by Midpen in the coastal area. And I think that's one of the key points that we're trying to make, is that we want to be strong partners with farmland and the ag community and support their efforts with our property and our purchases along the coast. In addition, Midpen has reintroduced the grazing that I had spoken about. And then we've also had a point that when we're purchasing property, that we minimize our purchase of prime soils or farmland. And we believe that's to support the private farmers' ownership on it, that those lands would be really tied up in our regulations, where the farmers have more flexibility and are more agile to be able to manage that property. So it definitely, we support their efforts and feel like they are a much better steward than we would be on those. Next slide. I'm gonna pass the presentation over to Louis from our Natural Resource Department.
Thank you, Omar. Can folks hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So again, my name is Louis Reed. I serve as the district's rangeland ecologist. And as Omar mentioned, a lot of the agricultural lands that Midpen owns and manages fall within our conservation grazing program. I think a number of components of our mission on the coast side and the coastal service plan come together quite nicely in the conservation grazing program. As is the case with all of our other lands, not in the coastal service area, we are very interested in protection and enhancement of the biodiversity that's unique to these lands. We are interested in managing wildland fire risk by managing fuels on these lands. And of course, the grazing program is a unique opportunity to support local agriculture by keeping these lands as working rangelands and working collaboratively with members of our ranching community on these first couple of points. We can come back and go into a little bit more detail on those if folks are interested. One thing Mike asked me to touch on was our recent grazing policy amendment. And so this process, multi-year process, was focused on how we address risk of predation on our conservation grazing properties and how we make that compatible with maintaining both the biodiversity component and the active ranching component of these programs. The policy amendment has sort of three components, one of which is a research component. We learned through the process that there's actually a lot that we don't know about preventing risk of predation. And so over the next few years, we will be recruiting partners to help us conduct research to better understand that. And then there are two economic components to the policy amendment, one of which is formalizing our existing practice of reimbursing tenants for confirmed losses due to predation on our lands. In the past, those reimbursements had been based on the weight of an animal at the time of loss. We've upgraded that now to base that reimbursement on the average weight of animals from the rest of the herd when they go to market to better reflect the true market loss that tenants experience when they have losses due to predation. The other economic component is actually a reduction in rent rates to help account for losses that are harder to quantify. Sometimes losses can't be confirmed. Sometimes you don't know what the loss is due to. And so out of recognition that there's some inherent risk of loss on these properties, we lowered the rent rates for our tenants. That's a little bit of an update on our grazing policy. But in general, I think these components come together quite nicely in the conservation grazing program. That's all I have. I think what we've got up next here is to open this up for questions. So if we can go to the next slide, Mike, Omar, and myself be glad to take any questions folks have.
I have a question. My concern is that now we're getting a lot of public coming to the coast. And they're doing, they're coming to use the trails, which that's what it's for, I understand. But we're getting a lot of people that are going off the trails and trespassing. And people got the attitude that, it's all theirs now. And I see where agriculture is going to possibly have some problems here. And I think that, it would be nice if Midpen would kind of, help us defend that and not let people just come and take over and end up on private property as well. It's kind of, it's putting the burden on property owners and on the coast, because I don't think we're, prepared for the amount of people that we're getting over here now. And when they get here, they just want to take over and go where they want. And I think Midpen should help us try to control that if they can. That's just my opinion, but I can see that's going to be, more and more of a problem. Anyone else have any concerns or questions?
Carrie's got her hand up.
I got a
Who's that?
I think I heard Bill and Peter, and then on the public side, Carrie's got her hand up.
Okay. Bill, you want to go ahead?
Thanks, BJ. Yes, I have a question on the grasslands with Midpen. What are your policies and programs to encourage and enhance the native grasslands?
Thank you, Bill. This is Lewis again. That's very much what the program is oriented towards, and it sort of varies on a site-by-site basis. But each property has a grazing management plan that is very much oriented toward maintaining and enhancing both the native plant communities and wildlife communities that are associated with those properties. So that includes things like stocking rates that aim for sort of moderate level use of the properties, the placement of some of the infrastructure that Omar was talking about is actually part of how we meet our conservation goals on these properties. So we use fencing and placement of water sources, for example, to influence the distribution of the animals on these properties. So I think fencing is straightforward. There are places we want to keep livestock out of, like major riparian corridors. But there are places that we want to encourage use by the livestock, and distributing water resources across the landscape is one of the ways that we accomplish that. And I guess the last point that I'll make on that is just that we monitor these properties throughout the year, but annually, to just do an assessment on the status of those resources. That answer your question, Bill?
Do you partially, yes. Do you monitor the percentage of native grasses compared to the other grasses?
Yeah, at this point, not in a real quantitative way. We document the distribution of native grass species by resurveying a set of established monitoring points from year to year. We are moving toward more quantitative monitoring of things like plant community composition. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Thank you, Louis.
You're welcome. Good question. Thank you for asking.
Peter?
Yeah, I got two things real quick. Like the first thing that I want to say, I agree with BJ's statement, and the second thing that I want to say was, for over the past 10 years, every time when Mike Williams came to give a presentation, I always asked, what is he going to do to separate the public when it's a issue of a trail, separate the public from the agriculture, because I always felt the two never mixed, and I always like to have a fence between the two separate. Thank you.
Okay, Carrie, I think was next.
I appreciate Michael and Omar and Louis coming and providing all this information, and I'm very happy to hear about the upgrades on the grazing policy so that there would be a predator loss at the full value, and you know, and an accommodation on the rental rates. That's all very encouraging. My question is, on your annual budget for the management of these lands, is what would be the for the fire protection measures? I think that's that's heavy on everybody's mind. If there's some infrastructure and additional access improvements so that we can have that additional protection, and any updates on that, and just how much of your resources are devoted to that would is of a concern and important to the coast side. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Carrie.
Carrie, this is Louis, and maybe Omar or Mike want to chime in on this as well. I can't address the amount of the budget component of your question, but I hope that you're aware that we're in the process now of developing a comprehensive wildland fire program that will include a lot of the things that you're asking about. You know, sort of ingress and egress or access issues for fire response, fuels management, that type of thing, and really trying to be proactive, but also have reactive contingency. And I'm sorry if that's sort of a just a part of what you're asking about. That's about my level of understanding of it. I don't know if Mike or Omar wants to chime in and try to add a little bit to that. If you like, I was just going to say that.
I'll add to what Louis said. So we do have a wildland fire resiliency program. We did do a presentation, I think, last fall with PMAC. I'm sure we could schedule a presentation on that program with the Ag Advisory Committee at a future meeting. But Louis is more knowledgeable than I am on this.
Thank you. The more communication, then the more you can sell it to the locals and get more cooperation with access and everybody working together. So I appreciate everybody's efforts on this.
I just wanted to make one additional point on that, is that we have been working with groups for CCC to do brush clearing in several preserves. So the amount of work that our field land and facilities teams have been doing, the fire prevention and fire resiliency is probably our largest focus that we've been working on as the field group. And then we do have a very robust kind of grants department that has been soliciting additional grant money and funding towards fire resiliency program. I think you might have noticed the eucalyptus removal on Page Mill, the upper section, and there are other projects where we're looking at key fire components that we can improve on both sides of the hill as we work in the future, because fire is such a prevalent aspect for us that we definitely take it serious and are working to make improvements along those lines.
Thank you.
Ron's got his hand up.
Anyone else?
I think before we double up, Ron's got his hand up.
Ron?
Yeah, BJ, If I'm permitted, could I ask a question of Mr. Williams?
Yeah.
Mike, you indicated that the district now has 12,000 acres. I'm wondering if you give us a clue as to how much you think will be enough. And that 11,500 was thought to be about the right number when the service plan was approved by LAFCO.
Mike, do you want to?
Sure, Ron. So the service plan had a 15-year projection, and that was the projection for 15 years. We've been in the service plan since 2014. So I think we're in the midst of our 17th year. I do think we've been doing a very comprehensive look at the San Mateo coast, and I think there are a couple post projects that I believe everybody's aware of at Johnston Ranch, and in the future potentially Cloverdale, that are things that are protected. That Midpen has been identified as a takeout partner, and then I think beyond that, I think a lot of our efforts are going to be probably more in forest conservation, in probably the larger Pescadero watershed, or conservation forestry, probably be a participant more so on an easement basis going forward in the future. Did that answer your question?
Just to follow up, so the answer to the question is the sky's the limit, in that as you gave your presentation, you recounted all the folks you have to pay compensation for, or tax loss to, like the schools, fire district, and Rita brought up, you buy up all the private land, and housing is even more difficult. And you maybe should be paying a housing compensation fee. But to get back to the agricultural issue and conservation grazing, the amendments to the grazing plan evolved into what is now referred to as a conservation grazing plan, and it became a conservation grazing plan after it left the Farm Bureau's purview. Conservation was inserted into before grazing plan 21 times, and then it was defined finally in the conservation grazing. And that is, conservation grazing is the intentional use of grazing management to meet resource management objectives, including protecting and enhancing habitat for native plants and animals that occur in grassland habitat, and moderating the negative effects of invasive exotic plants on these species. There is no mention of the grazing plan, a management plan for grazing that increases forage values, that increases agricultural values. On leased lands for grazing, Midpen does not allow the raising of hay. It does not permit. It doesn't, in essence, allow sustainable ranching, self-sustaining ranching, sustainable ranching. I agree with Carrie that there was some progress made in the amendment of the grazing plan that advanced economic compensation for predator loss. A lot of that predator loss is because of the work of MRSD to protect these species. I think that the Midpen organization should be looking inward instead of outward for more land. Protecting agriculture is not that easy. It's not a matter of getting the words right. And I think that most of the folks at Midpen have agriculture, the best interests of agriculture in their heart. But I don't think they would recognize a lot of what is cultural in agriculture. And I think that as a district, as a recreational district, primarily that the district does better than its competitors. But I think that it's blind to its impacts on agriculture and on the environment generally. Thanks, BJ.
Thank you, Ron.
BJ.
Mike, you got anybody want to make any comments on that?
Well, I'll just respond. Ron had said that my answer was sky's the limit, and that's not what I said. I said that there are a couple post projects that I mentioned that are probably the few projects that are ahead of us on grassland projects on the San Mateo coast. And then I think Lewis did a good job talking about the balancing act between grasslands and watersheds and ranching. And that has always been our coastal mission since we came to the San Mateo coast, is balancing that mission. Thank you for your comments. And we try to take them to heart, but we don't always agree with the comments that we get.
I completely forgot the 20-minute warning, so sorry, this is the 30-minute.
I've been kind of watching. Anyway, okay, Mike, thank you very much. Omar and Lewis, appreciate your presentation. And hopefully that we can continue to work together and compromise and try to make things work for agriculture as well as recreation. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, BJ.
Thank you.
I just wanted, before we move on, to thank Carrie for this idea and thank the Midpen team. This was a very helpful presentation for me. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to the subcommittee's been working on a draft for farm stand guidelines, so we can move into that.
Great, I'm going to read it into the record. This is regular agenda item number 8, the continued committee review of draft farm stand guidelines. Planning staff is requesting input and feedback on these draft guidelines. The guidelines were composed with input from the Agricultural Ombudsman, Environmental Health, and the Planning Department. The draft guidelines were previously discussed at the March 8th, 2021 AAC meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll open this up for discussion and discuss it. Comments on this, please.
Hi everyone, it's Audria. Nice to see you guys. This is back at this meeting. Last time I really enjoyed the conversation that we had around your thoughts around the definition of produce. And I think everyone saw just how complicated it kind of gets when it ties into other departments and their regulations. So it's been a month since you guys had a chance to look at it, and I'll just let you take the conversation where you go. So we discussed produce a lot. We discussed the value add a little bit. And that's it.
Bob's got his hand up, and then I also have a question after Bob.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I just wanted to talk about the stands and what we're mostly is what we're allowed to sell. As we all know, that agriculture is shrinking in San Mateo County, and there's a lot of stuff that could be grown here that isn't grown anymore. Stuff like garlic, onions, potatoes, sweet corn, all could be grown. I don't know anyone that does it commercially, and that's all good sellers on the farm stand. And in order to sell it, you have to get it out of the county. And people want these items when they stop at the stand because they don't realize that, hey, we're limited by staying only in the county, or we're going to be limited to however it works. But, okay, artichokes are a good seller. They're seasonal. By May, they're drying up, and then after that, it's very little. Peas are seasonal and have a longer season than artichokes, and they're a good seller. Fava beans, Brussels sprouts, leeks, they're all seasonal, but you don't sell that many of them. It's good to have some. People come looking, a lot of old people looking for fava beans, but it isn't the type of thing that you're going to sell a lot of. Strawberries are a good seller, but there's not enough grown in San Mateo County to get them wholesale to sell them at your stand. Apples are a good seller, but I only know one commercial grower in San Mateo County, and they don't start until the fall because of our weather. Green vegetables, there's some of those being grown, but most of those that I know are sold at the farmers markets. They're not selling them to somebody who has a stand that needs stuff to sell. Oranges, peaches, nectarines, apricots, avocados, mangoes, cantaloupes, watermelons, all stuff that aren't grown, and I don't think they can be grown commercially in San Mateo County, but it's all stuff that people look for when they stop at the farm stand. Tomatoes grow in San Mateo County, but they don't get ripe until late summer, and people are always looking for tomatoes. Cherries are the best seller that I've ever had. Everybody wants cherries, but they don't sell them. They don't even grow them commercially in San Mateo County. So that's what I'm getting at. So artichokes are a popular seller. Peas sell good, but when families stop at the stand, they want something to snack on, such as fruits. And if you don't have it, they don't return. They might come out just for artichokes or peas, but they shop for other stuff if you have it. If you have just a couple of things to sell, your farm stand's not going to stay open very long. You're not going to be able to do it. The farmers market in Half Moon Bay opened a couple Saturdays ago, and I know this is a little different than a farm stand, but they've got people all over the state selling there. There was one outfit from down in Ridley, California, that was selling oranges and grapefruit. There was people from Watsonville selling strawberries and flowers. I mean, they can do it in Half Moon Bay, but we can't do it out on the agricultural land. That don't fit really good for me. But anyhow, that's all I'm talking from experience. I've been doing it for over 40 years. So it's something I think that everybody should think about. The other thing about required a density credit for a permanent farm stand, is that going to all of a sudden, maybe pretty soon you're going to have to get a density credit for your barn or your storage shed? I mean, how does that go with the farm stand? I don't know. And it says permanent farm stands must have paved and striped parking lot. I don't think the pavement is what we're talking about with agriculture on the coast, and you can have a good parking lot with rock and asphalt grindings and done right, and just as good as pavement, and it looks a heck of a lot better than pavement. But anyhow, I just wanted to get my point across. My hearing is not really good, and we've had a lot of illness in the family in the last year, and plus my hearing drives me nuts, and I have hearing aids, and I still can't hear good on the phone. But I wanted to get here, and Ron walked me through how to get in, so I made it, and thank you everybody for your patience with me, and thanks for listening to my concerns. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Ron, for showing Bob how to connect. So Bob, so just to follow up on your comments, would you be in favor of allowing the sale of product from outside of San Mateo County?
Well, yes, we're doing it now, and everybody will keep on doing it unless they're stopped, because people do look for everything, and the fruit is the big thing, because we don't have the weather for good fruit growing weather. Back in the canyons a little bit, but not out along the coast. And plus, there's not a whole lot of. I mean, we know it. There's a lot of little farms things starting up, just small few acres that go to the markets themselves, to the bigger markets and stuff. But we're kind of a dying breed. I hate to see us die off altogether. But yes, I am in favor of bringing the stuff in from out of the county, because with myself, if I can get it locally, I will. But if you can't, then you got to go up to the South City to the market and get some.
Thank you. So that's included right now in permanent farm stands, but not in temporary farm stands.
Yeah. And I don't think that. I mean, the little guy is the temporary stand, and he's the one that needs the help the most.
Can I speak?
I want to make another comment what Bob had made about parking lots, about paving. I don't think you can pave, especially if it's prime ground. I don't think you can pave it. I think that's one of the regulations that the county has, that if you did have a farm stand, you can't pave prime ground if it's on prime ground. Anyone else got any comments or questions?
Yeah, Peter does.
Actually, I think I was next. Sorry to jump in.
Oh,
And then Peter,
sorry.
oh, and John, I see you're here now. Laura, would you mind promoting him to panelist? Awesome, thanks. I just actually, first I want to say, Bob, thank you so much. This is what we've missed, is your level of expertise and experience. And thank you, Ron, for making sure, for helping him get in. And maybe Laura and I can brainstorm a little bit on how to make it easier for you to access these meetings. So just want to thank you. My question was just a process kind of question. You know me, I'm always stuck on process. For Audria, last time you had wanted us to focus on certain parts of the review in our conversation. Do you still want that level of focus on different parts, or is this more kind of a general conversation?
Yeah, I was just, I think at first I said just go at it, but in hindsight, I think that we should probably have some sort of structure, just because there is a lot of stuff included in here. And so, so wherever you guys, whatever next topic you guys want to do, that's great. But I think it would be helpful if, like, we talk about parking, we talk about value add, we talk about lighting and signage or whatever in separately, so we can just make sure that all the comments are, it's more of a conversation around a certain topic instead of trying to stitch together a bunch of different comments, if that's okay.
Definitely, I think that'd be helpful, not just to speak for myself. So just as a suggestion, do we perhaps let the other questions go? I think we had Peter, and then Carrie has her hand raised, and then Audria, maybe you can ask us some guiding questions throughout our conversation just to keep us focused.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah.
And Bill, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, BJ. First of all, I agree with Bob Marsh, and we had our produce stand over 20 years ago, and we even had, that was approved by San Mateo County, a hot dog cart, and the hot dogs we got was local from Norm's Market, and the buns as well, and that was a good calling for all the other produce that we did sell at the time. And as far as paving, the NRCS, I don't think they would even want to have things paved. They like things to water to filter out through the ground for the groundwater. And the other thing I want to say is on the temporary farm stands of 200 square foot, I mean, ours was a 8 by 40 foot trailer, just 320 square feet. This is, I think, 200 square feet, even on a temporary stand, is kind of small. Thank you, BJ.
Thanks, Peter. Who's next, Laura?
I think Carrie had her hand up, and then I also see Bill's hand up.
Okay. Terry, you said?
Hey, yes, I was wondering whether a stand could be on wheels. So maybe then eliminating the need for a building permit, that might help people out. I absolutely share the concern about the parking. I deal with parking and stormwater drainage plans, drainage plans. They're very expensive. You need a civil engineer. So, I mean, that is something that even though I know the county has competing interests, I mean, they want to promote farming, but they also have the stormwater protection measures. But hopefully in the rural area, there could be some areas that could be found to meet that requirement. A little bit confusing about environmental health, whether for your stand we'd have to have an independent water source. Are they going to let you have porta potties to serve your patrons? That would be important. I also am very concerned about density credit. I mean, for 1,000-foot maximum building, wouldn't, that hopefully that would only, consume a fraction of a density credit, because that seems like that's kind of a high value item for what would be a very small building, and hopefully it wouldn't be overly inundated with people, that they would be dispersed enough so that it wouldn't impact the area. And also whether, as the county does for farm labor housing, whether there could be a reduce in the fees for these types of enterprises, if they're appropriate. That's something to consider. And finally, I do understand that we want to highlight what we can grow in the county, but sometimes busy families and people, they just want to make one stop and get enough things. But it would just be something where hopefully that the majority of the crop would be in San Mateo County, but sometimes you still need to please people that just want to make one stop on the highway and get home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie.
Bill's next, and then Audria has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that was for you, Bill.
Bill?
Thank you.
Okay.
So a couple of things. It is the proper topic now what we're selling and what we want to sell at farm stands?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, Bill.
Am I correct on that? Because I
Yeah.
want to follow, properly.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So one of the things that I first really appreciate Bob Marsh's comments and everybody's. I think it's a pretty rich discussion here. The thought I had was the sale of agricultural, environmental, ranching, and nature supplies and equipment such as seeds, planters, growing kits, native plants, like maybe beekeeping equipment, bird houses, like home poultry supplies, baskets, flower growing kits, how-to books and resources like that. I'm curious as to what people's thoughts are about that. And another thing I'm wondering about is, like, we have the South Coast Artists Alliance that, sells at the Pescadero Art and Fun Festival each year and does a big fundraiser for the schools and stuff. I'm wondering if if local art could be sold at the farm stands as well, local arts and crafts, and like to know what people's thoughts are about those things. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks everyone for your comments. I too am really enjoying this conversation. So a couple responses to what's been said, and I think, so the first is about the the density credits. I think Laura, it would be great if you could speak to that, as well as the pavement and planning's perspective on including that. And then with regards to the sale of other equipment and the 200 square foot being too small. So these guidelines were written to fit within existing regulations. So the farm stands are included in the coastal development or local coastal plan and planned agricultural district guidelines. So that's what lays out size, what can be sold in terms of where it's from, San Mateo County for temporary or anywhere for permanent. And so we came up with these guidelines to try and fit them in so we could just work with that word produce, because that's what's allowed to be sold. And so if you guys want to expand the temporary square footage, by all means, that can be a recommendation. Just know that that's a little bit more complicated. That's going to require changing the actual regulations instead of just what can be done within this guideline framework. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. And then Bill, that kind of include, that's an answer to your idea of selling these other products that we were working with that word produce. And so to expand that to include books and kits and stuff probably doesn't work with under that word produce. But if that's something you guys feel that should be allowed, it's just going to be a different process. That's all. A lot of comments about density credit. So Laura, do you want to start with that? And then we can have a conversation about that.
Yes. Okay. So this is all a conversation. This is our first stab of it. So everything is kind of, for lack of a better term, up for negotiation and recommendation. Our general thought from the planning department was once you have a permanent structure, it starts to consume density credit which is different than a barn, because planning's take at the moment is you need a barn for active agriculture on your site. It helps you produce. You need to store your items, etc. A farm stand, while advantageous towards a parcel, isn't necessary to produce on a parcel. It's an add-on that helps sell your product, but is not core to agriculture on site. So that was a distinction that we had. And because it's not core, and I know there will be differing opinions on this, but because it's not necessary to produce on site, we're currently leaning in the direction that these permanent structures that will be around for many, many years and have somewhat of a high volume, since they are permanent, would consume a density credit. But we are still having internal talks about this, and we need to also review and have a conversation with the Coastal Commission as well. So that's our general take at the moment for density credits.
Well, I would think if you have to get a density credit, I don't think you're going to get too many stands, because density credits are pretty expensive, and it take a long time to recover your money just to buy a density credit, I would think. And I just like to make a comment on all due respect, Bill, but I think that when you have a produce stand, it should be all related to agriculture. And I understand what Bob's saying, and I think there should be some leeway there for that type of stuff that he's talking about that we don't grow here. Because you think about it, most of the Christmas trees come from out of this county. A lot of trees come in here out of the county. There's even a fair to be grown here, but you can only grow so many, and it's somewhat understandable. But there's leeway there. There probably should be leeway for other stands to have stuff that Bob was talking about. And more encouragement for people to grow more different items in this county to help agriculture. Because I've said it many times, agriculture is dying in this county. And I don't care who says that it's doing great, it is agriculture. And it's, the stands help. You know, you can sell your items, you can bring some other items, but I don't think it should be a flea market. I think it should be related to what we do in the county, and anything that is not that you're going to bring in from out of the county should be agricultural product, not other items. There's other places that can be doing that. There's commercial property in town. This helps, promote your product and keep agriculture going. And I think that's what we should be concentrating on, in my opinion. I hate to see us going getting a whole different kinds of items, because then all we're going to do pretty soon, there's not going to be too much agricultural product. It's going to be more whatever popular sells, and that's not really helping agriculture, I don't think. So anyone else got any comments?
And let's keep this to comments about the density credits right now, and then we can move on to another topic.
I got one question regarding density credits.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, just so I'm clear, the way I know you're looking into it further, but the density credit is only for the permanent stand. The temporary stand, you don't need one, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I had the same question, Peter, so thanks.
Okay, we read each other's minds.
So let me ask you on a density, if you have a piece of property and you want to put your stand, a permanent stand, and you own the property and you have a density, you have to use that density up in order to put a stand?
As currently proposed, yes.
Carrie's got her hand up,
Go ahead,
probably
Carrie.
about density as well.
Carrie.
Thank you. Well, since you need a CDP for the permanent stand, and since you could have conditions on that and review from the county to ensure compliance, I just, hopefully, Laura, you can explore that a little bit more than a density credit, because I absolutely share BJ's and others' concerns that to consume a density credit, people are not going to want to have a permanent stand, and then even on a so that's just something maybe in the that the permit itself could be structured in a way to address the intensity of use by the hours and the and the operation. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Lauren. I'm going to jump in. I'm curious why a permanent farm stand dedicated to growing the ag products or value-added products from that farm wouldn't be considered core ag use, like a barn.
Because it's not necessary to produce on your property. You can have agriculture on your property and not have a farm stand, but it's harder to have agriculture on your property and not have a place to store your products or whatever else you need.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Does anyone like the idea?
I'm
of the
wondering
density
if on
credit?
the density credits, and I think BJ,
Go ahead, Bob. I mean, Bill. Mhm.
can you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
Go
Go ahead.
I think BJ or somebody else had mentioned that perhaps if density is going to be required for a permanent farm stand, that perhaps it could be, you know, a quarter of a density credit or some other, you know, smaller portion, rather than consuming an entire density credit, which is basically what you need for a single family home. It seems kind of excessive to use a entire density for a permanent farm stand. Just my opinion. And also I wanted to say, BG, I really appreciated your comments on just the thoughts I'd had, because I wanted to just kind of get it open for discussion. I'm not necessarily advocating or not advocating. I'm just kind of wondering about that. If somebody's selling honey, you know, local honey, what about selling, you know, like hives that people could set up at home, or things like more directly related to what they're producing, not like a whole, you know, ag supply store, feed and fuel at your place, but something more directly related to what's produced by my neighbors.
No disrespect. I appreciate, you know, bringing it up so we can discuss it. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I got a comment on a permanent stand to get a density. Why couldn't we do it the same way they do with greenhouses? You get a permit to put up a greenhouse, but when you don't use that greenhouse anymore, you're supposed to take that greenhouse down, take it out. So why couldn't you put restrictions on a barn, if that's what it's going to be for a stand, that when they're done with it, they have to take it down if they can't prove that they're going to, you know, use it for what it was intended for?
I think that's what the temporary is. You can have that for 9 months. That's kind of where we're going in that direction. But if you want to do that for a permanent, I don't know how long, like you can have that for 10 years, for 5 years, for 20 years. And so you have to do that calculation from a planner's point of view at the start, at the beginning of the permit. When you just say we're going to take it down one day, I don't know when that is. And it could be many years in the future.
Well, again, another thing is farm labor housing. Farm labor housing is the same requirements.
So yeah, farm labor housing does
Why
not.
couldn't it be the same? You know, I mean, one is just as important as the other. And why, you know, why would you have to have I mean, the money it's going to cost the person to put a density, it's just prohibited. And I don't see where anybody would really do it, to be honest with you.
We hear your comment of your concerns about the density credit, and they're noted. So we'll take them and talk about them internally.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else got?
Just gonna say we're at our 30-minute point.
Okay.
So I just, did anyone have a comment in favor of the density credits? I want to make sure I'm not just capturing one side if there's another side.
Anyone have any comments about that?
I have a question. Sorry. If the farm stands indeed do not have density credits, I think that planning would put a limit on the amount, like the quantity of farm stands you're allowed on a property. Are there any thoughts on that? Because we wouldn't want a situation where a property has, for some reason, 5 different farm stands, because you could have a huge property. So if indeed we do not do density credits, another control for development would be limit of size or quantity. Do you have any comments on what you think is appropriate? 1 per parcel, 2, not to exceed X amount of square feet. Any ideas for an alternative to control intensity of development?
Well, I don't think you have to be really concerned about having people put 2 or 3 farm stands. I just don't think we're going to have that problem. I think you're going to have a problem just getting 1 to begin with. So I kind of think that that's not really a worry to me. I'd like to see somebody doing it, but I doubt very much if you're gonna see that. I think Ron said it one night. I think we probably got all the stands we're probably gonna see. There may be another handful, but that's probably gonna be the limit, I would think. But who knows? But that would be my concern. Yes, Laura?
Just kind of follow-up question to that. Are there any properties currently in the county with more than one farm stand?
Not that I'm aware of.
I do not know.
I feel similarly with BJ. I feel like just given the property sizes,
Yeah.
for pretty
But as a
small chance.
but writing regulations, you have, especially when I'm, applying those regulations, I want to write them so this situation doesn't come up in the future. So we think ahead. So there's already a bumper kind of. So we don't get in a situation in which someday there's 5 on a property and we have no way to regulate that. So it's thinking ahead to potential problems when you're writing regulations that I'm focusing on. And I do agree that it's not an issue now, but I don't want it to be an issue later, which is why I brought it up.
Yeah. Well,
Cynthia
go
had
ahead.
her hand up,
Go ahead.
and then Ron.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Who's first?
Cynthia, you're first.
Out of curiosity, is there a way to know how many farm stands exist now? Like how many are permanent and how many are temporary? Like what's existing?
Not especially. We don't have a specific farm stand permit. So there's no way for us to really search for farm stands. You would have to look at the hundreds of CDPs that we've ever issued. And that's a haul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, BJ, just want to remind Andrea that we're not doing regulations here. We're doing guidelines. So I don't. There's not a problem that has to be regulated. We're as you indicated earlier, these are guidelines, not regulations. So we're not going to be prohibiting anybody from doing anything. We're just writing guidelines.
Well, if that is the case, does it mean that cannabis products is just a guideline to be prohibited?
No, I think that's the law. But,
Yeah.
in a regulation,
Being a little
but I
tongue-in-cheek.
think it should be reversed in that these farm stands should be able to sell pot plants, and yeah, that would put the kibosh in a lot of our social problems. I think if everybody had a pot plant, and
I do not
think
disagree with
help,
you there.
it will help local agriculture tremendously, for these farm stands to have pot plants and potted plants and flowers and food for the soul and all kinds of things. But agriculture is something you have to grow, as BJ says. Anyways, thank you.
And I'd like to make one other comment. I think that's what you got this advisory committee for, the ag committee for. You know, put limitations. Put every 3 years you got to come back and renew your application to see if they are doing agriculture. And if they're not, then they should be denied. And if they are, they should be encouraged. And it's got to be somewhat, I hate to say, but policed. It's just like, you know, I've said many times, the farm labor housing is not being policed and it's out of hand. And this could happen the same way if you don't set guidelines and then check on them and make sure they're abiding by them. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
And then I think Bill had his hand up next.
Are you recommending that there be a separate permit for farm stands where there is none now?
No, I don't think there should be a permit. I think there should be just an application to let you know that you want to put a farm stand, what you want to, you know, put out what you want to do on an application, what you're intending to do, and if you're selling your own product and other products within the county, or we agree that you can't bring stuff in from other counties, then it should just be permitted. This should not be a permit to
Well,
sell produce.
there's no way without a permit, there's no way for us, the county, to go out and inspect. We have no record. We need a permit issued to go back if you're recommending that we do enforcement checks on these things, especially for temporary farm stands where you don't need a CDP at all. So that's some food for thought.
Well, this is something I think, again, I want to say, this is something that should be discussed with Mr. Monowitz, to discuss it, to see if we could get some kind of exemption from this. Because I understand if you want to put a barn up, you just get a permit, right?
A
They don't
building.
go back and check. Yeah, but it doesn't go through the ag committee even no more. So why can't you just kind of ease up on these restrictions, since it's trying to promote agriculture that is dying in this county, and we're trying to save it and doing everything we can. And it seems like the county wants to do everything it can to bury us with permits.
So to say these regulations are intended to open up and make it easier, and that's why we're having this discourse. We're not trying to make it easier. We're trying to open it up and get your feedback. So we're hearing you, and we're trying to respond in the best way we can to your needs and also our regulatory needs. And sometimes that creates a middle ground that no one is really happy with, but it's better than what was existing before. So we're opening it up.
Okay.
I had a question kind of along these lines. I remembered us in the last meeting, I think Commissioner Corrin shared a little bit about how you monitor that. Was it just the permanent farm stands that you check in kind of annually? And I couldn't remember exactly the details. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind refreshing us on that.
So we look at the farm stands for labeling, quality, packing regulations. I'm sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm having trouble hearing you guys sometimes.
Oh.
So yeah, so we go out and we check certain regulations that we have the authority over. We look at the planning and buildings guidelines or codes. Did I answer your question, Lauren?
I know you refreshed kind of what we were talking
Yeah.
about last time. Now, in terms of temporary versus permanent, do you check on both, or is it just the permanent stands because they have that produce dealer's license attached to it?
We look at any one that we actually know about. So we have an internal list that we keep and try to like update on, what we see happening. So we'll go through that list, and it will add to it or take away from it depending on what we see out in the county. So yeah, so produce. So if anyone's selling produce not of their own production, they are required to have a dealer's license, and that we would just refer to the California Department of Food and Ag, because they're the ones that actually have the authority to look into that further.
On this
Thank
topic,
you.
I have a question. So are farm stand owners required to notify the commissioner that, hey, we have a farm stand? Or is it just you guys drive around and you see, yeah, there's a new farm stand, we should look at it one day? And make sure.
Yeah, they're not required to inform us of it. So it's just kind of like, we're here, we're a local enforcement agent. So if we see something, we'll put it on our list and go and check on it.
Just following up, if you don't mind, what I'm thinking is I completely agree with BJ's perspective, and I've been hearing it from not just this committee, but other farmers I know in the county, that they don't need an extra hurdle to jump over. So I'm resistant to the idea of creating a permitting process, because I deal in ag permits and I know how difficult, not just ag permits, but all of them are. I'm wondering if like a registration process might be helpful, where they just have to notify Commissioner Corrin that they intend to do this, so that she has kind of an avenue to be able to do these kind of annual checks as needed. Would that be burdensome to farmers? I mean, it's still maybe creating extra paperwork, but I'm curious to explore that idea a little bit. And Bill, I see your hand next.
Just to clarify, permits are required now, so it's not an extra requirement that is being proposed right now.
But
Bill?
there's not an ag tourism,
ahead.
similar to ag tourism permit. You're saying there's a farm stand permit for both temporary and permanent?
It's not a separate, there's not a specific farm stand permit, but there are permits associated with the development of farm stands.
What about the temporary farm stands?
Temporary farm stands, depending on size, will need a building permit, even if they're temporary, and then they need a coastal development exemption.
Okay, that's interesting to know that they're already through the building, the building permit process. There's already some checks. Anyway, I've used up enough time. I think Bill, you're next, and
Bill, go ahead. Bill?
Okay, so I'm a little confused on this, but my understanding is that temporary farm stand was simply an allowed use on a PAD parcel. I'm hoping that that is the case, and I would hope that that would continue to be just simply an allowed use on the parcel. I think that, once again, I was impressed by Bob Marsh's comments that allowing some produce from outside the county to be sold at our temporary farm stands could be really beneficial to helping the farmers make it. And I find it hard to believe that anybody would want more than one temporary stand on their parcel. So as far as having a limit, I'm thinking that it probably would not be a problem for anybody. And I'd be interested, BJ, in your thoughts on this and anybody else, is that if there was a limit to one farm stand per parcel, to one temporary farm stand per parcel, I don't think that would probably ever come up as an issue in our lifetimes.
I don't believe it would, Bill. I think one would be.
Of course, I'm older than a bunch of you guys.
I don't think me, though. No,
Laura's good.
Well, I think that the only possibility of that happening is if you allowed everything under the sun to be sold. You know, not that you were suggesting that, Bill, but if you had a kind of like a multiple different stores kind of focusing on each 1,000 square feet and you had them lined up, you know, that kind of a thing. Not unlike what you see on Highway 92. I know those are all different people, like maybe there's different owners of each one of those or farms, I guess, but you know, I guess something like that would be possible. But it certainly no one would be motivated to do that if the only thing they were selling was produce.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, I got a question.
Laura's got her hand up, I think.
Yes, to respond to one of Bill's questions about farm stands being an allowed use on PAD lands, they are the temporary ones. You do not need a PAD permit to engage in temporary farm stands construction and sale. But you still do need a building permit if it's oversized and a coastal development exemption because you are in the coastal zone. And a farm stand, I do not believe, is exempt. You still need a CDX, as you do with any barn that you build. You don't need a permit for a barn, a PAD permit, but you still need a CDX for constructing that barn. So it's similar in that aspect.
Okay.
Question, get a chance.
Go ahead.
Question, Laura. If you had a farm stand, let's say in a trailer that you hook up to the back of a truck or tractor, it's less than 200 square feet, and it says you pull it out on your property, near the road, but it's on your property, and then at the end of the day, you pull it away back into your yard, and then the next week or the next, say it's Saturday and you're only doing weekends, and the next day you set up again and you pull it back you need a permit for that on stuff you grow yourself, on something as small as just a wagon hooked up to a trailer growing your own product?
I am not sure. I don't want to give you a wrong answer. Whenever you have anything on wheels, it gets iffy with the building department on if you need a permit. So I don't know the answer to your question, and I don't want to give you a wrong one. So I'll circle back next week and tell you a more firm answer.
Got another question. What if it's on the back of your pickup truck and it's on your property? End of the day, you drive away, and it's only the products you grow, even if it's 2, 3 of them, 4.
I think that would still fall under a temporary farm stand. I will think about it and get back to you on how we would process that.
Because the way I always understood it, if it was a product that you grew on your own property of your own product, you didn't need a permit of any sort, and it was okay.
You do not need a permit, a PAD permit. I do not know. I think you still need a CDX. So which is a minor permit.
I think that the local coastal plan, that CDX, that's about development, right? So like what is considered development? And I know that that's a broad definition of development, but if it's a vehicle that you're moving, how is that different than like parking your car in a different location every day?
Because it goes towards intensity of use. So you have a farm stand, whether it's on wheels or not, and you've now put it on a parcel. You are now inviting traffic and customers to that parcel. You're increasing the intensity of that use, and that falls under the definition of development in the LCP.
So
and that's how it's written.
I'm just going to jump in on timing. We've got 5 minutes before 9.
All right,
Maybe we want to continue this.
Here's a question. So I've got produce here, and I ask people to come out and pick it up. You mean to tell me I have to get a permit for somebody to come pick up a product that I grow on my ranch?
No, it's different. So having a farm stand is like a mini store, for lack of a better term. So you're opening up a mini store on your property, and as a land use planner, that's intensifying the use. Because it's a temporary use in a temporary farm stand situation, you would have a coastal development exemption, which is a CDX, which basically says we're intensifying the use, but it's going to be at a minimum time frame, and we don't expect any impacts. And then it's a $300 fee, and you sign a paper and you send it off to the Coastal Commission, and that's kind of your permit. It's very administrative, as opposed to a full permanent structure where you need a full CDP, possibly a public hearing, you need a written permit in hand. So you need a permit, but it's a very minor permit because it's in the coastal zone, not because it's zoned PAD, but because you are in the coastal zone. And that's controlled by the LCP.
Interesting. Well, I think we ought to probably come to a halt here for now and discuss this at another meeting, because I think there's probably more things we're going to think about between now and the next meeting to discuss. So I want to thank everybody for their input, and think about this for next meeting, that we'll discuss more about this, I think.
Do we need to motion to continue discussions?
Please.
All right, can we get a motion to continue this issue?
Actually, this is in the minutes, so Lauren will make the motion to continue discussion. Is there a second?
Is the second? Yep.
Hey, Lauren.
Bill.
You the second, Cook? Bill? Bill, no. I've never called you Cook. My brain's going.
It was, I think.
Sure, I'll second.
Okay, we got Bill in the second, and I think we still need to do a roll call vote. So let me get through this as fast as possible. BJ?
Yes.
Louis?
I think Louis probably went over.
Oh, okay. Cynthia?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
You, Peter?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
and I'm Lauren, and I vote yes.
Audrey has her hand up.
I have a process question. Since it's a month in between these conversations, and I feel like there's probably going to be a few more, I've been taking pretty detailed notes, and I realize that they're not going to be in the minutes for the meeting, but I feel like it might be helpful to share them with the committee before the next meeting, to kind of capture what had already been discussed and refresh everyone. Am I allowed to do that? To share my notes?
Yes, but I would say that I need to include those notes in the packet. So that everyone can see them, public members.
Okay, Laura, I'll connect with you about how to do that.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think the public should be interested in this as well, because we want to listen to their input as well. They may have some good ideas. So, thank you. Okay, the community development portion of this, I think you can see on your agenda that there's application coming up for the firehouse. I guess our next meeting. And I don't think there's too much else. Next meeting's the 10th of May. And there's nothing else. We'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
When did we adjourn? Was that?
It was 8:59.
Thank you.
8:58, 8:59. It changed time as I was writing it.
Under 9 o'clock. We did it.
How do I exit this thing?
I will help you 1 second.
Bottom right, usually, is big red leave button.
I'll remove you. Okay, that was pretty good.
Very good discussion. I love that today.
Let me stop recording.